But that paradigm is an individualist paradigm aimed primarily at protecting individuals against the state and other people, not in connecting people to one another, which is the next great revolution that we need to bring about. So what we're about is simultaneously supporting those current liberal and progressive struggles. I suspect PISLAP people were happy about the confirmation of Ketanji Jackson Brown. If I got that, Brown Jackson, I mean. Of course, that was a victory within that paradigm. But there's another paradigm being born that we are trying to seed and give life to. And that's the paradigm that emphasizes social connectedness, empathy, compassion, our capacity to deeply connect with one another, which is the next revolution in consciousness that is needed for humanity. It's needed not just in our cities and in our local relations, but obviously also in international relations, where the aim needs to be to build common understanding, open-heartedness, and mutual affirmation, rather than sovereignty-based wars, violence, fear of the other. All that has to be transcended. So we are seeding the groundwork for that with patience. So that's my introduction, and I'll introduce Duncan to say just a few words.
So I am Duncan Holloman. I am a lawyer and psychotherapist, mostly psychotherapist, but recovering lawyer. And I am currently at Windhover Performing Arts Center in Rockport, Massachusetts, looking out of my camper van onto the lawn. And it's a beautiful day. And how about if I pass it along to Elaine?
All right.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, hi everyone. Lovely to see you all. It feels like a few months since I've connected in with PISLAP, so it's just really nice to be here. So I'm based in Ireland, in kind of the Midlands, rural Ireland, and yeah, what to say. So you know, I think I've met many faces on this call before. I'm a lawyer too, and on a journey, as we all are. My journey at the moment kind of feels very much about, I suppose, integrating in an embodied way all of these things we talk about. You know, I was in London a few years back and started this magazine, The Conscious Lawyer, which, you know, has been great and has been the reason that I've connected so deeply with PISLAP. And I feel like coming back to my roots here in Ireland just has been this journey into really trying to bring these things like deeply into the body, you know, and just really living it, rather than just talking about it as a concept, which is where it starts. I suppose definitely started there for me. So yeah, it's you know, it's an ongoing piece, but feeling very much into kind of this work around the feminine, not in the sense of like feminine masculine, but just this feminine way of being, maybe, as opposed to the mechanical system, you know, that we've been living in, and just trying to bring that more and more into who I am. Yeah, so that's just where I am today, so sorry for just kind of spurting that out. But yeah, so will I pass it on to somebody? Jennifer, I'm going to pass it to you.
And I have to encourage everyone to be somewhat brief in order to make sure we
yeah, sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Jones. It's so good to be here with all of you this beautiful spring, at least here in Denver, which is where I'm based. I lead a people's law office, and I'm also in legal education as well. I also am on the executive committee for PISLAP. But most importantly, I feel as though I'm a seeker in terms of wellness and spirituality. And PISLAP has been a mainstay for me as a lawyer in seeking that. So I'm happy to be here with you all. And with that, I'll pass it to Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Fenner. I am coming to you from beautiful Brooklyn, New York. I've been a lawyer primarily for a long time, and I'm easing out of that. I have also been a bit of a teacher and a writer. And I was very much searching for what PISLAP had to offer, and then came to rest, knew that it was the right place the minute I discovered it. So I'm now fortunate enough to be on the executive board, and I'm doing everything I can to try and spread the word. And I will pass it on to Perry.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm Perry Sedman, and I'm currently in Washington, D.C. At my home up here so that I can enjoy spring. I can enjoy the flowers and the blooming bushes and the trees, because they have none of that in Miami. It's just constantly beautiful in Miami, but there's nothing budding or sprouting. It's kind of just swaying palm trees, which is fine. But I came up here for Passover and just decided to stay a couple more weeks. So that's where I am, and that's what's going on. So why don't I pass it to Elizabeth McDowell?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth McDowell, and I'm a law professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so I'm in Henderson, Nevada, where I live, and where it's also kind of relentlessly sunny, and most of the time. But we are having spring, and that's very beautiful in its own way in the desert. And I think I've been on the mailing list for a while, and I've been really interested in what you all are doing. I was familiar with Peter's work in critical legal theory and kind of legal consciousness. And so that was, appealing, and thinking about how to, and also just generally wanting to, I'm just really burnt out being a law professor right now in this environment, and looking for different ways to be more personally fulfilled and connected through my work in a way that feels healthier and more positive. And this group seems to, be working on a similar path that resonates with me. So I'm really happy to be here. I was also really interested in this topic of mediation. And I've recently signed up for a social justice mediation training. And then this really resonated. And I'm just, trying to find a way to be, more like personally, be more of maybe a healer than a fighter, and get better tools for that. So thank you for being so welcoming. I also just wanted to mention that because I have to drive to another appointment that's at 11:30, I'll turn my camera off later so that I don't disrupt, if that's okay.
Sure.
While I'm moving around getting ready. And but thank you for being here.
Great, thanks. Do you want to call on the next person, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'll call on Reem.
Okay, great. And everybody try and keep, because of the desire to hear from Brad, let's keep our comments short. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reem Humaida. I am Professor Roth's student, majoring in political science and philosophy at John Jay College. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm an aspiring lawyer, so I'm taking my LSAT this summer. So I'm excited to be here and to learn what Professor Roth has to say. I'm going to pass it on to Bonnie Silverstreet. I butchered that last name. I apologize.
That's okay. It's Bonnie Silvestri. And thank you so much. I was having trouble getting in. I am on the executive committee and I'm here in Sarasota, Florida. I'm super excited to hear Brad's comments. And in about 3 weeks, I'm starting teaching a class in the Honors College about women in the law, but I kind of gave it a long jazzy name, but looking forward to talking to you about that as well at some point, but so excited for today. Thank you.
Call on the next person, Bonnie.
I came on late, so I really don't know who didn't go.
Okay, I'll do it then.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny Nadelsky.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. So I'm really pleased to be here. I've known Peter slightly for decades, and we reconnected just pre-COVID. And I'm really happy to discover PISLAP. My work has been for a long time about relational approaches to law. I wrote a book called Law's Relations. And I just finished another one called Part-Time for All, which is why we should all be doing unpaid care work and limiting our paid work to 30 hours a week. And I've returned to my first interest of property, bringing a relational approach to property so that property contributes to environmental sustainability instead of being a barrier to it.
Perfect, thank you. Would you like to call on the next person?
Oh, and I'm speaking to you from Toronto, Canada, and I'm a law professor, but not a lawyer. And how about Duncan? No, did we hear from Duncan?
Yes, we did.
Oh, Diane, and we heard from Diane. Ken.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'm in Ken Haldenstein, he, him pronouns in White Plains, New York, Lenape Native American territory. I also spend winters in Sarasota, Florida, as Bonnie may know, and I spend summers in Vermont. I'm going to put a note in the chat with some additional information. And I call on Aideen Byrne.
Scotland.
Hi, well, I'm in Ireland still at the moment. I'm so excited to hear from you, Brad. I really enjoyed hearing from you a little bit during the intensive. So I can't wait. Briefly, I'm off to Brazil shortly to be a visiting researcher there, looking at Indigenous rights, environmental justice, and spirituality. And I'm also headed to New York in August to go to Cardozo Law School as a visiting research scholar focused on atrocity prevention with the same kind of topic. So I'm very excited for all of that. And thank you for this community support. It's really been wonderful.
And we look
I don't know who's
meeting.
next.
Why don't we go with Amber next and then Robin after that?
Hello, everyone. My name's Amber, and I'm from Gibraltar. I'm a barrister. In America, I think you call them litigators, and was practicing as a litigator for about 17 years, after which time I decided I can't continue expanding what I've created, which is a model of practicing what I call holistic law, which brings healing to lawyers and clients in the context of the lawyer-client relationship and during the process of resolving legal disputes. So I thought, well, I can't carry on going to court and litigating in an adversarial system which is anti-therapeutic and doesn't promote healing. At the same time, I'm trying to promote a model that is the opposite, which is therapeutic. So about 5 years ago, I turned more into consultancy work, and I've set up during COVID a website where PISLAP features, where Brad Roth, I'm very grateful to him. He wrote a blog for the blog section. So, and I'm promoting on that website. I'm promoting the integrative law movement and all sorts of different models of what I call therapy. David Wex's term, therapeutic jurisprudence. So I'm looking at promoting collaborative law and restorative justice, unitive justice, and the lawyers that are in the integrative law movement and who promote peaceful and more humane ways of practicing law. So my next step at the moment is I'm transitioning into writing. So I'm in the process of writing my first book, which will explain my journey into how I became a holistic lawyer, what I term a holistic lawyer, and how I created my model, and importantly, how lawyers can put it into practice. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm amberlaw.com, and I'd love to hear from you. And if I can promote your work on my platform, I think it's really, you know, as Peter was saying earlier, it's really important that we connect with other like-minded people, and, you know, there is strength in unity. So thank you for your time. Looking forward to hearing Brad.
Oh, well, we have Bruce Peterson and Robin Morris, I see.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Bruce Peterson. I'm a retired judge. I'm in my home office in Minneapolis. I'm a longtime member of PISLAP and a former member of the executive committee. And I have gotten to know Brad some because out of my experience in PISLAP has grown a course I teach at the University of Minnesota Law School called Lawyers as Peacemakers. And Brad was kind enough to talk to my class last fall. The concept of mediation and meditation is really central in my mind to some of the new peacemaking activities of lawyers, because they require a personal change in consciousness for many of us. And that's why I'm very interested in Brad's work. So thanks for doing this. And that's all I have.
Okay, Robin Morris, please.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm currently in Vallejo, California in my kitchen. I used to work in securities law, but got burned out and quit my job to travel for years. And now I work in e-discovery.
Great, thanks, Robin. Is that everybody? Yes, it is. Okay, so do you want to introduce Brad then, Nanette?
Just briefly, because I know everyone, and just, myself actually as well.
Oh,
so
yeah,
no, I
too.
just
I'm in
realized
San
that.
Francisco.
Go ahead. And I'm in New York City. I work in a office providing free legal services to a low-income community in New York, and focus on racial, social, and economic justice, as well as my work in PISLAP. So great to be here with all of you. I'm just every time I hear our introductions, and particularly today, I'm just really just deeply impressed and glad to be part of this movement and to be with all of you. So just really want to welcome Bradley. He, I think you all read his bio, so I won't review that, but also just say that Brad has, in addition to all of his other accomplishments and his work as a mediator, he's also been a member of PISLAP for quite some time and a supporter of the movement to renew legal culture. And we're just very, very glad to have Brad speak and to hear about his work with Mediators Without Borders and his work on meditation. And just over to Brad.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Peter, Nanette, and the executive team for the honor of addressing you. I've been a proud member of PISLAP since 2019. I started attending PISLAP in meetings in 2014 and became familiar with this movement in 2010 when I was introduced to J. Kim Wright and her work in transforming legal culture. And so I thought maybe it could be nice for us to sit for a moment in some type of meditation, which I'll very lightly guide just to kind of bring us here. By the way, I'm in New York, New York City, and yeah, very, very happy to be here. So why don't we just all take a deep breath, and I'll close my eyes. You don't have to. And we'll just, with your permission, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, this is not imposed. And we'll just sit for maybe a minute or two. And want to take a deep breath. Of course, exhale. We want to inhale and exhale and be aware of our lungs filling, and we'll become aware of our bodies. We're sitting, we'll feel the pressure of our bodies on the chair. We'll probably be aware of our thoughts. The feeling in our body. the feelings in different parts of our body, the air entering in and out of our body. And perhaps we'll become aware of the space which we are inhabiting, the room that we're in, perhaps beyond that room. We may have thoughts. We can see if we can be aware of the space between our thoughts and the space within which our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations arise and pass away. And then slowly we'll open our eyes and return. If our eyes are already open, that's fine. Return to our rooms or our Zoom room here. And thank you very much for joining me with that. Thank you. And so I have a PowerPoint, but I don't want to bludgeon anyone with PowerPoints, but I'll use it as a guide. And maybe we can go back and forth a little bit, if that's okay. So, and I just want to say we'll modulate. In hearing all the introductions, I'd be more interested in hearing from you than hearing myself speak. I just am just in awe of just the pioneering and heartfelt work that so many of you are doing. And it's just a beautiful community and to be a part of, and to hear so many trajectories that are emanating from or heading to the same kind of goal or vision. And it is certainly a visionary movement. So let's see if here we go. So this is, I slapped, in the spirit of PISLAP, I slapped or lovingly placed a title here, which is Mediation, Meditation, and Law, but this can certainly be modified as we go through. And I see this as a discussion rather than a presentation. So I welcome your questions, comments as we move forward through it. This is the kind of anticipated and agenda. So we have meditation. I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience with Mediators Beyond Borders, a little bit about my the mediation and meditation course, of which Reem, one of my students, is a member, and then open up a discussion for whether the approach of the mediation meditation course might have relevance to legal training. And then if we have time, we can speak a little bit about inner social responsibility. So just as way of, before getting to that though, as a way of brief background, because it kind of, in the spirit of integrality, integralness, so to speak, maybe I'll take you very briefly through my bio, which is just very briefly. So just from when I was at a very young age, I started to have intimations that there was more going on than what met the eye. And even in elementary school, I remember looking out over the playground, seeing the children playing, and just becoming overwhelmed with this feeling of love, an impersonal love that brought tears to my eyes, and that seemed to reveal a strain of eternalness in consciousness itself, so that I didn't feel I was 8 years old or whatever it was. And that really, to me, I was a bit of an outsider in that way. I had friends, but I always felt like there was a lot more going on than I knew. And that kind of pulled me as I went through college and I majored in philosophy. I always wondered, what is the relevance? Although I was extraordinarily struck by the philosophies that I was learning, I always wanted to know, how does this relate to my life? How does it relate to wisdom? And so after college, I did take the LSAT, like Reem is taking it, and so many have taken it, with the idea that I would probably become a lawyer. But I went to India because I was pulled by this vision. And had very powerful experiences of non-duality, and I tossed my books, philosophy books, very lovingly. And I did work for Greenpeace later, so I say this with some shame, into the Ganges River. So hopefully they biodegraded in the Ganges River by now. And then thereafter, undertook a journey that was related to spirituality and pursuing the implications of non-duality in the world, especially with respect to the evolution of consciousness over the next couple of decades, working for nonprofits. As mentioned, I worked for Greenpeace and others in certain times in quasi-legal capacities. And then I wind up, I did decide to go back to school, pick up the books again, go to law school, because I felt I could really do more if I were to have a legal education. And while in law school, I saw, since I was a little older, that this was really challenging some of my values. I mean, people were speaking about things in law school class that really challenged my values. And I did feel I was almost being like in a boot camp. I loved law school on one hand, and the other hand, I felt that it didn't really necessarily resonate with this unity and oneness that I had, that had been the touchstone of my life and was still of most importance to me. So in law school, I became aware of mediation. And what attracted to me about mediation was that rather than it being an adversarial win-lose setup, and of course, we all know that there are different variations of that, including collaborative law and others, that generally it tends to be win-lose, that in mediation, we could discover common interests. And because my deepest vision is that we're all kinds of cells of the same body, we're all constituents of one greater consciousness, that very much appealed to me, coming together in a higher unity and synthesis of interests, rather than a competition of positions in a win-lose context. And so I took a mediation clinic at Cardozo. So Aideen, that's why I gave you that thumbs up, apart from other things. And then I was mediating at the EEOC and community mediation centers and in small claims courts. And after graduating law school, I was in a fellowship with the EEOC, both on the legal side and the mediation side, and also became familiar with Mediators Beyond Borders, which is a nonprofit organization that is devoted to realizing a more peace-able world by building capacity for mediation and advocating for mediation worldwide, including at the UN. And so very soon after law school, I was asked to co-found and to serve as the chair of Mediators Beyond Borders New York, and I've served in that role since 2011. And also during law school, I was introduced by a mutual friend to J. Kim Wright, whose book, Lawyers as Peacemakers, I was inspired by as well. And then so I'll walk you through a little bit of the work with Mediators Beyond Borders, and then I will transition into the work with John, the mediation meditation course. And then I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, if not before then, regarding the applicability of the quote unquote inside out approach to teaching mediation that we have in the course that I teach, and see if that might be relevant to the legal education, a more humane approach to legal education, where people don't need to be, and everything I'm saying is kind of generalized and there are exceptions plenty, but where people aren't kind of entering into a mental boot camp to reprogram the way they think in order to be good lawyers. Can we stay connected to our humanity, to our own values, to our own life experience, as we learn these concepts of whether it be contracts or real property or torts, any of the first year canon? Can we relate those to our own experience as we progress, that we don't need to be divorced from our deeper sense of self? And I do want to give a shout out, of course, to Judge Bruce Peterson. He's one of the pioneers who I think is encouraging law students not to lose sight of the inner world, the importance of it, and it serving as a touchstone as we progress through legal education. So does that make sense? Are we all on the same page about this? Any questions before we proceed? Okay, I'm trying to read facial language and body language, but it's tough, but I'll go forward unless there are any strong objections. Okay, so this is Mediators Beyond Borders. I'll just do a quick introduction. So as mentioned, I've been the head of the Mediators Beyond Borders New York since 2011. The organization was co-founded by Ken Cloak, who is a wonderful author based in LA, a visionary author, peacemaker, who was watching the unfoldings in Bosnia, Serbia, in the mid 90s, or tumult on TV. And he said, wouldn't it be better than, instead of parachuting and dropping bombs, if we were able to drop mediators by parachute into these war zones, that we could find another way other than killing each other to resolve conflict, right? So, and the Mediators Beyond Borders is building local capacity for peace and promotes mediation worldwide. We do this by enhancing local capacity upon invitation, advocating for mediation in all arenas, and providing consultancy service that promote peaceful conflict resolution. So the parachuting doesn't just come as a whim, or it usually comes by invitation by partners on the ground. The only lasting peace is the one built by the disputants themselves. And that, obviously, for those of you who are familiar with mediation, accords with mediation. Mediation is the agreement comes as a result of the participants freely consenting to and frequently building their own agreement, rather than it being imposed upon them by a third party, such as a judge, a jury, or an arbitrator. So let me progress here. Okay, and Mediators Beyond Borders has a variety of projects worldwide, and has an international training institute where it trains for free women in 18-month programs. This international training institute, they train women peace leaders in consort with those who are in the local communities to assume a greater role in peacemaking. And that's been done in the MENA region, in Southeast Asia, in Eastern Europe, in South America, and other locations. An 18-month peace training program, capacity building program. And that has rippled out. They estimate the hundreds of participants who freely participated upon application has rippled out to literally tens of thousands of others in their respective communities, because those women are leaders in their respective communities. And you can see there's also other types of capacity building and advocacy initiatives, including for climate change. Mediators Beyond Borders has attended the COP conferences related to climate change to encourage disputants to adopt mediation approaches rather than other approaches, so that it could be more effective. Parties can be more effective in reaching climate change goals. There are also country projects: Sierra Leone, Colombia, Kenya, Southeast Asia, and others. There's also trauma-informed peace building programs, which talks about the impact of trauma on those who are in these conflict zones, and the need to address trauma if there's to be lasting peace. And an example of that is the work that's being done with respect to the crisis in Ukraine, for example. We just recently concluded, I participated and I was running this, and a lot of these are Mediators Beyond Borders international initiatives here. These aren't New York, although New York members participate in it. But for instance, I just went through the track 1, Building Capacity to Serve, Introduction to Trauma-Informed Peace Building, which was especially focused on Ukraine. And they have a track 2, which is specifically focused on assisting those who are working directly with Ukraine or with Ukrainian refugees. And it also works in a consultancy with organizations that are directly doing that work. We also have a child and youth ADR working group. This is a training that in New York we conducted with members of the diasporan community in New York, of Sierra Leonean diaspora community, where we provided for free a 5-day mediation training program on successive Saturdays and very hot July and August Saturdays, where we did an equivalent of 40 hours of mediation training with leaders of the local Liberian community. And New York members represent MBBI at the United Nations. We're regular attendees at the High-Level Political Forum and the Commission on the Status of Women. I've attended events related to non-proliferation training, treaty commissions. We negotiate, as mentioned, for inclusion in mediation language and climate change policy, partner with Rotary International and global peace building projects, facilitate New York-based conflict resolution trainings and workshops, and advocate generally in support of sensitive, sustainable conflict resolution. Some of the, just to show that this, and I really resonated with what Peter was talking about with a new consciousness. When I was in law school, I wrote a note regarding how to work out my proposal for working out the dispute in the Arctic. And I said that the Arctic goes beyond nation-centric states of consciousness. We have to go to a world-centric consciousness in order to address, just as we have to do with climate change, just as we have to do with the pandemic, address the challenges that face humanity. They can't be just worked out by one nation or 192 nations. We need to evolve to go to a world-centric consciousness. And my kind of secret plan is I wanted to see that when people did searches in Lexis or Westlaw in journal articles, they'd come up with something saying world-centric and evolution of consciousness. And so in Mediators Beyond Borders in New York, I've tried to have a number of events that echoed that or continued with that type of approach. So some of the events we've had are inner stillness and peace building, relating how we relate to conflict inwardly to how we address conflict outwardly. Mediation and evolving worldviews. Is a crisis in democracy, a crisis in mediation? Politics, dialogue, and the evolution of democracy, which was the title of Ken Cloak's book. We sponsored him to, or we had him speak to us. And what's the point of spirituality when society is crumbling? That's actually an interview that one of the past MBBI board members had with me, where he was saying, what's the point of spirituality? And I had to kind of take the flag and say, we need spirituality more than ever. So does anyone have any questions about Mediators Beyond Borders? I hope that didn't go on too long. There might've been a lot of information. While I was speaking about Mediators Beyond Borders, we were holding conference in Mediators Beyond Borders, New York. We would hold our meetings on a monthly basis at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Maria Volpe, the head of the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center, Professor Maria Volpe, was a regular attendee at our Mediators Beyond Borders meetings. And after several years, she's invited me to teach at John Jay. And I said, I'd love to teach conflict resolution at John Jay, but I'd like to teach mediation and meditation. And she said, great, let's do it. So I'd been inspired to teach mediation and meditation because I took a course also with Thomas Hubel, who is a spiritual teacher and visionary, as well as William Ury, who is the author of the seminal negotiation book, Getting to Yes. And they taught a course on mediation and meditation, which I took. And then I thought this would be wonderful, although I don't use their materials really at all, except a little bit of William Ury's Getting to Yes. I was inspired by the title. So the course focuses on the theory and practice of mediation and also explores how meditation can enhance one's capacity to address inner and outer conflict. We look at the types of conflict and various ways of resolving them. We learn about the knowledge of the types of, we learn about the types of mediation, principles of mediation, stages of mediation, qualities and values of the mediator, basic understanding of fundamental dispute resolution techniques, active listening, open-ended question, reflecting and summarizing. And we look at meditation, its increased role in Western society, and its relationship to the practice of mediation. For those of you who aren't familiar perhaps with mediation, it's a process of dialogue and negotiation in which a third party assists two or more conflicting parties with their consent, it's voluntary, to prevent, manage, or resolve a conflict without recourse to force. So the parties themselves are at the center of the process, and they're the ones who get to determine their future in regard to each other, and they have to respect and be interested in the interests of the other party, which is very different than in an adversarial system, a rights-based system. This is an interest-based system, an interest-based approach. And if the one party doesn't acknowledge the interests of the other party, they're not going to reach an agreement because the agreement is not foisted upon them or imposed upon them. It has to be voluntary. Entering into mediation is typically voluntary, although increasingly it is mandatory for certain types of matters. But to come to an agreement is never imposed in mediation, at least to my knowledge. It is in arbitration, it is in litigation, but in mediation, the parties themselves decide, is this a result that I can live with? Is this something that will allow me to move forward into the future? And since both or all parties have to agree to that, we have to step in the other person's shoes. Because if we just advocate for our position, the other party's saying, well, I don't agree, and you're going to go back to court or you're going to go to arbitration. So mediation is a collaborative process. And you just see here some of the differences between litigate an adjudicatory process and mediation, win-lose outcomes versus potentially win-win. In arbitrational litigation, it's the outcomes are limited to the case or controversy. They're not going to ask you, well, how do you feel about the other side, right? How long does your relationship go back, unless it's relevant to the case? But they're not going to explore all the interests that might be there also to move forward into the future, except in specialized circumstances, perhaps family law, when you're talking about the best interests of the child going forward and whatnot. It's typically about a wrong that's occurred in the past and adjudicating that. So it's focused on the future. The parties decide rather than the arbitrator or the judge. Parties typically will take extreme positions to prove they're in the right rather than encourage to find common ground. There's a focus on stakeholders rather than just the shareholders. What's the larger community that's involved? It's also most typically quicker and less expensive than litigation. It can be used before an escalation resolves into a dispute, into a quote unquote ripe dispute. You can look at it before it's ripe, and we can look at it even if it seems to be moot. Frequently we can cure cross-cultural misunderstandings in mediation as well, especially with the help of the mediator. So the idea behind the course is we're all filled with that which we cannot see with the naked eye. We all have thoughts, longings, emotions, feelings, memories, judgments, interests that give rise to the conflicts through differences in these interests, ideas, principles, or values. And mediation gives us an opportunity to address that which has given rise to the dispute, and for parties working with each other to understand ideally each other's inner motivators, inner goals, inner interests, and to, rather than their positions, what they're advocating for, what's underneath that, what is it we really want, and to be able to come to a synthesis in many instances, not just a win-lose outcome, not just that if one person wins, the other person loses, but how could they each reach maximum satisfaction, potentially, have 100% of their interest reached rather than 0 versus 100 scale, kind of a one-dimensional plane. We can have what's called a multi-dimensional plane. My students are now viewing the video on that, a multi-dimensional graph, where you can actually get 100% of satisfaction through the common interests that are, or overlapping interests that are realized. So there are, so the approach that we take here in, and this is and I can distribute this these slides, but this is from Ken Cloak, the founder of Mediators Beyond Borders, who also talks about the overlap between mediation and meditation. It's not, I'm sorry, and this goes to the meditation part. So I wanted to teach meditation because I felt that just as my attraction to mediation came about of this deeper exploration of spirit and the sense that there's a lot more that unites us than divides us, I wanted my students to have the same, see if they would have the same experience and see if it would enable them to then learn the principles of mediation from the inside out, from their own experience, and see how it related. And so students from the beginning meditate in my class. We have, I don't lead the meditations, we have short mediation meditations, and they also sign up for a program called the 10-Minute Mind, which is freely available to all CUNY students and faculty. And so there are a list of benefits for mediators here that Ken Cloak discusses. Deeper insight into the nature of suffering and what might be done to release it. Greater willingness to move beyond superficiality in conversation and move into the heart or whatever is not working effectively. Or put another way, to move beyond the stated positions, the zealously advocated stated positions to, okay, what is it you really want? What's really motivating you? What, and a lot of times it comes down to basic human needs. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a lot of times the positions relate to those needs. And as mentioned here, a deeper insight into the nature of suffering and what might be done to release it. Greater awareness of what apparent opponents have in common, though they emphatically disagree and even dislike each other. That's from the deeper middle way. We also use in the class, and Reem hasn't gotten to this yet, but Inside Out by Gary Friedman, which he's one of the founder of the understanding-based mediation model, and how conflict resolution can help self-reflection to help their clients, and discusses how if we're not present with our clients, we're not going to really be able to be healers for them in their disputes. And here are some of the principles: that the solutions to conflicts lie in the feelings and perceptions hidden below the surface. There's no such thing as an objectively neutral mediator. The fundamental goal of conflict work is to help the parties better understand themselves, each other, and the realities they face. Learning to listen to the self makes it possible to listen usefully to others and to help them. And that indeed is the theme of the course, is that as we become more aware of everything, as we become through mediation and through meditation and self-reflection of the landscape, the inner landscape that we're navigating in our personal conflicts, the more that we'll be able to be of assistance to those who are navigating their conflicts. So in that regard, we have a number of, I encourage students, or I ask students to write different reflection journals. So for example, when they're learning about conflict, provide an example of conflict you were engaged in and identify which conflict styles were utilized by each of the disputants, what emotions you think you each had, and how the conflict was resolved. We explore the connection between inner and outer conflict, share whether or not you respond to inner conflict in similar ways, provide a specific example drawn from your own experience. Identify a quality or value in yourself or someone you admire that helps you to resolve conflicts internally or with others, and many others. So individuals are meditating, and they're also writing reflection journals and also engaging in discussion boards about how the teachings, the theory, relates to their own experience. And that way I feel not only does it more deeply pedagogically make an impact on the students so that they're internalizing the lessons, but it also enables students to reflect on the impact of this in their own lives and develop their own wisdom, their own self-understanding. So this brings us then to the question of, and there's more here about Inside Out, but I noticed the time, and we want to go, I think, towards the learning law from the inside, implications for legal education. I'd be very interested to hear what your thinking is with respect to that. Would it make sense? I know that when I felt very divorced from my own common sense, sense of common sense certain times when talking about torts and how that related to, would it make sense if we're learning certain types of principles that may seem to be polarizing our experience of the world, or divorcing ourselves from our own common sense approach to the world? For students in law classes to be reflecting on how certain common law findings or statutory injunctions relate to their own experience. I haven't really given this a lot of thought, candidly. I was just thinking that this could be a very interesting topic to open up. And I just also invite your questions, comments about everything I've also said, and we can go forward from there.
Thanks so much, Brad. So folks, the floor is open, and please feel free to jump in with any comments, reflections, anything you'd like to share. Bruce, yes. Oh, Bruce, you're muted. You're muted, Bruce.
Sorry. I have a comment and a question. Most of my students are third-year students, and I'll just say that we do mindfulness practice regularly throughout the semester. They often say they wish they would have started doing that as first-year students. So there is certainly interest among students to do this. The other question I have to ask and can't let you get away without trying a crack at it is, do you see any role for a mediation or meditation also in helping bridge the inability of political parties in this country to talk to each other?
Absolutely. And in fact, Ken Cloak is a big speaker on this. And he talks about in mediation, it may be the only opportunity that parties have to tell their stories. And it can be very healing to be heard and to be recognized. And Ken Cloak speaks about this in his books and is asking the stories. So instead of just becoming polarized by a person's position, what led you in life? And I'm totally riffing off of Ken Cloak here, so this is not my insight, but it's related to mediation. Is asking the deeper questions. So how is it? What happened in your life? Tell me your story that you feel so strongly about this issue. And a lot of times we can relate to growing up in a household where there were issues of concern, or there was issues of violence and whatnot. And we can find deeper connections there on a human level. And there are initiatives where there are various organizations, and Mediators Beyond Borders is a co-sponsor of this, some of these initiatives, where you have these deeper discussions, where you have Democrats and Republicans get together and speak about their human experience that's motivated them to take the political positions that they've taken. Now, I'm not starry-eyed about this. I am very deeply, and I'm not, I hope I'm not deluded about the potential for this, but I think it's our only hope. If that made sense, Bruce.
Yeah,
that was responsive.
Thank you.
Asking the stories that connect us. We all were divided, but if you go to the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all have basic or higher order hierarchy of needs. For example, self-actualization at one of the higher levels of Maslow's developmental model. But beneath that are, we all want to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be listened to and acknowledged. We all have care for identity. If we can come together about what's motivating us more deeply, we can connect on a human level. Now, is that going to change people's political views? Maybe not, but I believe that it could lower the heat, so to speak, and the tensions.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad. Bonnie, do you want to jump in?
Yes. Last time we met, I talked about Ukraine, and you mentioned your involvement there. So I was wondering if you could expound upon that a bit more as to how the mediators are getting involved. Were you doing training and then you're going to do things through Zoom, or what kinds of things are you doing? And are there things that maybe our group could do?
Sure. So just briefly, I'm only peripherally involved in that specific undertaking. I did, as mentioned, participate in 2 of the trainings that were freely offered to Mediators Beyond Borders members regarding trauma-based conflict, co-regulating, and other. We were learning a variety of different approaches in order to hear those who are traumatized in Ukraine and other conflict areas, Yemen and others. Mediators Beyond Borders specifically, though, is also engaged directly with, and I believe in partnership also with, organizations that are on the ground. So, for example, Mediators Beyond Borders is one of the, I think, 6 or 7 worldwide service partners of Rotary International, and there are Rotary offices and branches in the Ukraine. And so in partnership with those branches, they're directly speaking across borders about the trauma that they're experiencing. Mediators Beyond Borders facilitators are speaking directly with those who are impacted currently in Ukraine, or their communities are being impacted, even if they're not living in Ukraine. I don't have the specifics of what those conversations are. I've heard on the calls by the facilitators and the training calls about their experience doing it, but I can't speak much more about that. But you can, Mediators Beyond Borders is certainly interested in partnering with the other organizations. And also, folks can get involved. It's a terrific organization as well. I'm happy to direct you to whomever it is that you would need me to direct you to. And there's a link actually on the bottom of that slide that gives a link to the trauma-informed peace building.
Duncan, and then Peter.
I wanted to share some things that I've been struggling with for quite a while. And I'm quite familiar with Maslow and with interest-based mediation and all of that. My struggle is that Maslow's theory, interest-based theory, is still about the self, still about what an individual wants, what an individual needs. All of these needs-based ways of conceiving are still about an individual. They're not essentially relational. And it strikes me that the relational posture is one of care. And I think that's something that Jenny Nadelsky is looking at, is that it has to do not with what my interests are, but what I care about. And what I care about is other people and loving other people. The reason I stopped being a lawyer was because I wanted to care about people. So I became a psychotherapist so that I could do it hour after hour. And I found that deeply meaningful for me. In trying to bring what I learned back into the legal profession, I keep running into that same paradigm, which is that it's essentially self-based.
I'm going to say that you weren't paid to say that, Duncan. Thank you so much for those heartfelt and earnest, and I really I couldn't resonate more at all with what you're saying. And I agree. And that's why I said that one of the higher aspects of Maslow is that, and I think he might have talked about self-transcendence as well. And I do believe that and in our course, we talk about the larger community of our inner social responsibility. That's not just about our self-actualization, our fulfillment. And that's I don't know that we get to that, but we specifically introduced Vimla Thakur's concept of inner social responsibility, that we're evolving not for ourselves and for our own personal happiness, but because our mind is the human mind, as great J. Krishnamurti used to say. If we care about the conflict we see in the world, it's incumbent upon us morally, and perhaps even, we don't know how these things work, in reality, for us to transform ourselves. And when we close the door, Vimla Thakur says, we may think we're alone with our thoughts and that it's just a private matter, but nothing about human consciousness is a private matter. We are all one consciousness. It's indivisible. And we need to go beyond the egoic sense of self and the communalized egoic sense of self, which is nationalism, in order to not only come to a communitarian, world-centric perspective, but I believe a truly caring, even more caring, what Ken Wilber calls cosmocentric perspective, which I believe is where we're identified with the universe, and the fundamental forces, which I'm going to editorialize here, has to do with love. It's love. It's an impersonal love that has given rise to, and I'm not making any attributions with respect to deities or not, just as a disclaimer, but this deeper love that animates the universe, and which I think which has to do with care and concern for others, and love. That's the only healing. That's the only healer, I think. To go beyond the separate sense of self, the egoic sense of self. Our stories, we don't need to abandon them or jettison them. We have to realize that we are part of a larger whole and responsible to it. So thank you very much, Duncan. I appreciate that. Peter, Peter, yes.
So maybe this is very practically relevant to this question for you, Brad, or Bruce. How does the moment of meditation, if we were to introduce it into our classes, affect what takes place in the class? Or in meditation, what's the point exactly? Because I've been a contracts teacher for 40 years. I do try and convey the relational dimension of contracts to those I teach it to, but I'd like to introduce what I teach it, meditation, to get to a higher level. The image I have is of Brad, you staring out the window as an 8-year-old and experiencing our universal humanity as you watched your comrades play, something like that in your story. So I'm asking, what is your goal in introducing meditation into the midst of an externally oriented class, would otherwise be externally or analytically oriented?
I'm going to defer to I have things more to say about it. I love that question, but I would very much like to hand over the microphone to Bruce, because he's teaching meditation to third-year law students and has, I think, even more experience teaching meditation in the classroom than I have. Maybe not. I've been teaching it since 2019, but I'd like to ask Judge Peterson, if you'd like to, Judge Peterson. Bruce.
Well, the principal effect of meditation, in my experience, is to separate you from your thoughts. You see them, not only your thoughts, but your emotions. And therefore, you can introduce a moment, a pause between a stimulus and a response, between we have reactions to everything. There's science here. Danny Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist, has this book out on thinking fast, thinking slow. Most of what goes on in our minds during the day is totally automatic. We don't think about it at all. We just respond, driving, talking, eating. But so often in legal situations, when we're dealing with people, we have responses and we don't want them to be just automatic. We want to think for a minute. And that's one thing you learn as a judge, is that often your instincts are wrong. In fact, that's why judges write, is because you have to sit and think it through. And you gain a mastery and a control over yourself and your emotions if you've meditated enough to recognize you are not your thoughts. You can see them and decide if you want to follow them or not. Peter, just a very simple thing I do. I start every class with one moment of silence, just one moment. And I feel the class settle down and people start becoming more centered and more reflective, and just that. So that's my thought.
I love what Bruce said.
And open-hearted?
Yeah.
And open-hearted is my question.
Well, I think that once you see that a lot of your thoughts are judgments, so many of our thoughts are judgmental. This is good, this is bad, this person's right, this person's wrong. Our instincts are defensive. From millions of years of evolutionary history, we are cautious, we're concerned, we're anxious. And your natural open-heartedness can come to the fore if you can let go of some of the judgments and defensive thoughts that you have automatically.
I love what you say, and I could say from my own experience, it was an earth-shaking revelation to me when I realized I wasn't my mind, in an experiential way. When I realized, oh my God, that thought is not who I am, and that there was a deeper sense of self. And that sense of self, as Bruce is saying, it's not this polarized, reactive, automaton that we think we are, but there's a deeper sense of self there that I think is more spacious and more heart open. Just by the nature of it, is we all share that. We all share that, I believe, that consciousness that goes beyond divide. I don't know if that's responsive, Peter, or, I have more to say regarding teaching in the class. Just very briefly, the meditation I find in the class, and I'm teaching asynchronously online now, but I agree with Bruce, is that the class very much settles down, but also then they can relate from a different space to the concepts that are integrative and unifying in mediation, more from their own experience. And also, I would say that in law, if students can connect through these reflection journals and reflecting, how do these concepts that I'm learning reflect to my own lived experience, they'll either see that they resound or they don't, but then at least they'll be able to, they don't have to kind of wall it off. They can actually see, does this make sense from my own experience? What's it like to have a contract? Does it make sense to have a contract? And what kinds of thoughts and feelings have I had when I've entered into an agreement with others, and has it been abridged or not? I think that can more deeply inhere within the student of making it relatable, rather than just something to kind of memorize or be able to work with intellectually. I just think it could give rise also eventually to a more humane posture with respect to law. And again, this is something I haven't really explored myself. I just think it's an intriguing idea, or an interesting idea. Yes, Bonnie.
I just thought of one other thing when you were talking, and I don't know if you've already addressed this, but whether you, because there is that sort of moment of introduction and mediation, whether you start with a moment of reflection, or to what extent do you incorporate meditation in the mediation, maybe even after breaks or something like that.
Yeah, I don't actually advocate for, and I don't think that many are advocating necessarily for meditation within the mediation, because you can't really necessarily impose that on others at all. You can invite people to if they like, but I think one has to be careful if that's an answer for you. But I do have my students in some of my classes interview mediators with respect to their use of self-reflective practices, including meditation, and many of them speak to the need to take that moment for themselves before entering into getting in the middle of a conflict. The more that there's a book that we read, is a part of a book, Bringing Peace into the Room, which reflects on how peacemakers, if they're riven by conflict, they're not going to be of much service to those who are themselves riven by conflict. They'll be more use if they're able to address their own conflict, which is the theory of the class. is the more we're able to become familiar with how we address conflict, our relationship to it, then the more we'll be able to go deeper to uncover the interests that lie behind the positions of the parties in mediation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just thought it would maybe even elevate the experience more if there was a moment of reflection.
I think it's I think if parties are open to it and willing to do
Yeah.
it, certainly. I mean, I certainly would be in favor of that. I just think we need to be very careful, because if one party says, you know, you can maybe before they meet, you could say
Yeah.
confidentially, if you'd be open to this, but if not, it's fine. Because otherwise the parties may feel I have to do this in order to curry favor with the mediator, which some parties feel they need to do, or they'd be, but I think I agree with you fully regarding that. And in my class, when I do teach in person, we do have a moment of mediation. I actually don't lead the mediation. I mean, I'm sorry, meditation. I don't lead it. I have a short 2 or 3 minute clip, and I sit with them facing the tape recorder, so to speak, because I want to be a fellow traveler with them rather than the one who's teaching them meditation. I don't want to be a meditation teacher. I'm not, with them at least, and not generally, but we're on this journey together because I have something to teach them about the theory of mediation. But I say, for all I know, you're much wiser. I mean, we're all on this path together in terms of inner discovery and whatnot. So I want students to feel empowered by that, which is the truth, that we're all going down we're all self-explorers.
I think we had Amber, and then we'll probably need to wrap up shortly after that. So Amber, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Brad. It's been very interesting again to hear your talk. Going to what you mentioned before about inner conflict and outer conflict, one thing that I was not aware of in the early years as an attorney, as a litigator, was about secondary and vicarious trauma. So of course I was dealing with my own, let's say we all have our childhood traumas and baggage that we bring along when we're growing up, and the various experiences, good and bad, that we've had throughout our lifetimes. But then of course you sit down, at least I did, as a family and children lawyer, and in the early days as a criminal lawyer as well. And of course we're listening to clients who are coming to us in a lot of pain and traumatized by either successive events that have happened to them, maybe in the context of a violent marriage, or in a one-off sort of situation that's caused them a great degree again of pain and trauma. So in the UK at the moment, I'm being invited to speak to different law schools, and what I've done so far is I've tackled the subject of our nervous system and how we can prepare for client conferences, so that we can go through the body scan, through that maybe 2-3 minute meditation before we're meeting with clients. So we're like using tools to regulate our own nervous system ahead of going into a conference room and meeting with the client to take instructions, because invariably, at least in my experience, those clients were coming to see me and their nervous system was already compromised. So then one thing I think the students found very interesting was to learn about the fight-flight mode and about how we can actually influence our clients' nervous system ourselves if we're mindful and aware of what's going on with them in their nervous system. And I have been known with clients, again, as you say, you've got to be conscious and aware and see the signs as to whether or not it's appropriate. But I have actually asked clients before, let's take 3 deep breaths. I don't never serve them caffeinated drinks, because that's just going to spike the caffeine's going to make them even more agitated. So I'm always offering water. So there's clever ways which might not seem so obvious, but actually really do help the lawyer and the client. And obviously the important thing is that if clients can calm down, then they can give you clearer instructions. Because with stress, as most of you know, obviously, and with trauma, people will have trouble recalling events. They'll be suffering from memory fog and other sorts of, as well as the stress and anxiety and so on. So students, I think they found it very interesting that it was really important also to work on their own emotional, I call it stacking of what's been going on with them before they entered law school, and then what they're going through in terms of the stress of exams. And also I speak to them about, again, the whole idea about collaboration rather than competition. And one thing I'm a big fan of Kim Wright, as well as, you know, as well as obviously PISLAP and the other organizations I mentioned earlier. And I think it's really, really crucial that that we do wave the flag for all these other options for students. Why? Because when I asked the students like what their main concern was, or when I've listened into other talks by the university lecturers, they're saying, well, when they come, interestingly enough, when they come into law school and they're asked, why do you want to be a lawyer? It's all about doing good, being good, making positive changes in the world. But when they get to the second semester, the second year, which is when they're making applications for positions in certain, you know, certain law firms and so on, that's when they start getting more stressed. And then suddenly there's a shift. And when they're asked again, they're told, no, my interest really is money oriented. And apparently, listening to the Trauma Informed Lawyer podcast, as trauma goes up, greed goes up as well. And empathy and compassion and kindness and so on come down. So it's very important, I think, that students become aware that, you know, of what, if they're told about these things, if they're taught about these things, then they can pick up on it when it's actually happening to them. They can go, hold on, let's hold that thought a minute, you know?
Exactly. And I think that is the cure. Yeah. And I think that's so important. That's why I think this legal discussion of legal education is so important. Is that why do we need, maybe we won't need the phrase recovering lawyer. Maybe it won't be, you know, maybe the lawyer will be in a position to help others recover, and it wouldn't be such a kind of a, for some, a toxic and disorienting and also alienating experience, where they could stay connected with their own deepest values and humanity throughout the process by reflecting on and staying connected to their deepest values. So I agree with that. I agree with that completely. And Nanette, you were going to say something? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Amber.
I think Amber was just about to respond. But then
I was just going to wrap up saying that for me, at least personally, after 17 years of litigation, I mean, no, after 10 years, I was burnt out. I suffered burnout. And I think that it's so crucial, because I didn't know at the time about secondary trauma, or what that was, or vicarious trauma, or compassion fatigue.
Right.
And these are subjects that your students need to learn about, to distinguish between what is theirs, what are their thoughts and feelings when they're leaving the office on a Friday after a 60 or 70-hour week, and what is the transference of the trauma through, you know, through the nervous system, through the co-regulation of the nervous systems when you're in that proximity, that close proximity in client meetings or in courtrooms,
right,
of taking their trauma home with you.
Right.
So and that is I think the key to finding that well-being. So it's meditation for me, you know, the body scans, the meditation, mindfulness, all these tools, you know, trauma-informed law, let's learn about the nervous system. These are the kind of tools I think we need to be teaching law students at an early stage. So
great.
Yeah.
You got to come to you got to move to America. I mean, to Europe, or to, I mean, beyond Gibraltar. Gibraltar's great. You can
Friends, I don't mean to interrupt, but we are quite a bit beyond time, and I know folks are dropping off, and I want us to just close with a moment to really appreciate Brad and his work, and the work of Mediators Without Borders, which is so deeply relevant in our time, and the work of building that more cosmic consciousness that you spoke of, Bruce. I think we all share that in different ways. And it's been a great dialogue. I wanted to just close before we ended. Perry, I don't know if you're there behind the screen, but maybe you could just say a quick word about our call on May 23rd before everybody leaves. Perhaps Perry is.
In case Perry.
I know he's here. And Brad, thank you so much again.
Thank you for the opportunity so much. Sorry, I was typing in Mediated Beyond Borders there, but thank you for the opportunity. It's a wonderful community. I'm just so honored and I love this. You know, as I mentioned at the outset, the vision that's being that's from which this arises, and the impulse from which this arises, and the vision towards which it goes, which is all one anyway, I think, in the end. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thanks. Perry, over to you for a moment.
You're muted.
You're muted.
On May 23rd, our speaker will be Daryl Davis, who is an accomplished musician. He is a Black man who managed to befriend members of the Ku Klux Klan and get them through a personal one-to-one interaction to get them to realize that Black people are humans too. And at the end of a very long process, he was able to get several members of the Klan to quit the Klan and actually gave Daryl their robes. And there are other Klan paraphernalia. So he is going to speak about how you befriend an enemy, essentially, how the left and right might befriend each other instead of vilifying each other, because that's the way that hatred worked in the Ku Klux Klan. So he's very accomplished. He's written a book about this. He lectures all over the world, and I encourage you to join us, I believe, on May 23rd.
Thank you, Perry. It's a very unique call, so I wanted to make sure everybody had a little bit of a preview. So I hope you can join us at the same time on Monday, May 23rd. And thanks again, everyone. It's great to be with you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.